So right now there is a crackdown in Venezuela. They're already started to detain journalists. They're doing checkpoints in the country. I want to go over the details of this stuff. And let's just jump right in. So it says Venezuela launches wave of repression after U.S. seizure of Nicolas Maduro. More armed militias patrol the streets and journalists arrested as government crackdown on dissent widens. This is actually a very important story to talk about because we want to know what's going on the ground, what's going on with the regular people in the country, like how are people doing? And essentially, if they put a lot of pressure on journalists or, just anyone speaking out, then we won't know. And, then Trump can just go on TV and say, oh, everything's great. They love us. They're welcome as liberators or whatever, right? But I actually just want to hear from independent sources and also from regular people there. So already, again, Rodriguez is sort of trying to intimidate the reporters. Venezuela's new leader rushes to assert control after Maduro's fall and says Rodriguez declared a, quote, state of external commotion and security forces set up checkpoints. So they're searching your phone. They're arresting, again, detaining journalists. And basically they're looking for someone, who supposedly may or may not have helped the USA. It's hard to say exactly on that. I believe from the U.S. side, they said that they had someone on the inside, and then Venezuela's okay. We're going to find the insider person or whoever. There's also rumors or speculation, you could call it, that did Rodriguez, the vice president, sell out Maduro? Is there some sort of deal made there? I don't know. That certainly you could see the scenario with that happening. You could see it other scenarios. It could be other people high up. It's hard to say on this kind of stuff, but right now, just for regular people's experience, I got to go through these checkpoints. Someone's going to search my phone, look through my messages, and things of that nature. So people are, concerned for their safety. Here, this is from the Wall Street Journal. They said at least 7 journalists were detained, 3 of whom were later released. So that was from the Wall Street Journal. This is from the Financial Times. And then they say 14 journalists and media workers, 11 from foreign outlets were detained and then released. So depending on if this happened, from a journalist from your country, you might have heard about this. I'm not sure if any U.S. journalists were taken. I'm just seeing it here, though, that it was 14 journalists and media workers. I'll read the description. Gun-toting paramilitaries known as colectivos have been deployed to the streets of Caracas under a state of emergency announced on Monday, right? And those kind of dudes will look something like this. This is a description of it on Al Jazeera. It'll say, they can run around and do strong arm tactics kind of stuff. Sometimes they may contribute to the community. It could be any number of things, so that they do a lot of different things. But this is just one example of it. They won't necessarily be an official uniform. And it was interesting because I always recommend this movie. If you watch my channel, you'll know I talk about it all the time. But I just think it's so pertinent to the world that we live in today, be it in the U.S. or even Venezuela. It's called 1987. And it's about Korea back when it was under authoritarian military rule, essentially. And they had these kind of paramilitary dudes that would run around and intimidate people, basically, right? Kidnap people, etc. And the movie's really about when do regular people rise up and fight for democracy. And fantastic movie. It's a true story. It's based on history. I get emotional because I wish the very best for the Venezuelan people. I really do. And, I make no defense of Maduro or what Rodriguez is doing. I just hope the people, can make it through this. And I feel sad because I think it's not going to get any better with Trump. I'll just be frank with you on that. Read the description on this stuff. It says, a state of emergency decree dated January 3rd, but published in the official Gazette on Monday, direct authorities to, quote, immediately undertake the search for and arrest of any person involved in the promotion of or support of an armed attack by the U.S. against the territory of the Republic, right? So looking for who was a collaborator, who worked with the Americans, that kind of stuff. Who knows if they find anything? Who knows if there's anyone to find? I really don't know this kind of stuff, but my understanding, though, I think the Americans said that they had someone on the inside, which was kind of a strange thing to leak to the press. Who knows there why you would do anything with the Trump people. And then they were just getting reports that they are looking for someone, or persons, right? You never know in these things. Human rights activists in Caracas said repression had significantly escalated on Monday with authorities going through people's phones to see if they had anything that could be construed as support for actions of the U.S. The colectivos have mobilized with checkpoints erected around the capital, so in the big cities, right? Here's more, and it's good to read through this stuff together. The identity and whereabouts of several other detained journalists are unknown. So really don't know. Their families are afraid of making their names public for fear of reprisal, which I completely understand. So the foreign journalists are probably have a better chance of getting released. That's why they did designate some foreign, some not. Whereas if you're a local Venezuelan person, you can face a lot of repercussion, but you're a lot more danger. Put it that way. In the situation of Korea, and it's actually a true story. And when I mentioned movies like say 1987 or the one we mentioned now, The Taxi Driver, I want to say it was a German reporter. I think it was Germany, but he was able to document the things that the Korean military regime was doing. And the way this works is if like you're these paramilitary stuff or, soldiers and you're doing whatever atrocities or, basically going after your own people, you don't really want to go after someone who's not your own people, like a foreigner, because then it becomes this big international thing. So foreign reporters can actually do photos and stuff that, and reporting that locals can't. It's a really important dynamic to understand. And when you look at this, I'm just reading through this stuff, 863 political prisoners at the moment. It says Maduro's regime has characterized by intense repression before its downfall, with authorities often violently putting down protests while opposition figures have been harassed, arrested, or forced into exile, right? So there's one estimate, 863 political prisoners, and there's a lot of people who have left the country also. So it's unsafe. I mean, this is Venezuela, and it's tough because I like I said, I can't stress enough. I hope that the people of Venezuela can have a better life. I think it's a reasonable thing to say, but it doesn't necessarily mean Trump's method of blowing everything up is the way to do it. So, there's lots of various things, and then you got to bring this up because people did mention. I do appreciate you guys mentioning it. When the U.S. has sanctions on said country, or right now trying to blockade their oil tankers, so then how are they going to export their goods to bring money into the economy to help regular people? It's a similar situation in Cuba. If the U.S. cuts you off and tries to stop you from doing any business, it makes it really tough for regular people again. So this is the kind of stuff that Americans don't like to talk about. It's an uncomfortable topic, so you won't really hear much ever. Doesn't matter who's in power. Those topics that you won't hear much about. To be perfectly frank, they'll just talk about, we really got to punish the dictator that we don't like. But it has a severe impact on the regular citizens when the country becomes isolated. The idea is what you're trying to do is like, okay, we're going to isolate you, not trade with you, not let you trade with other people. And then therefore we hope that the regular people will overthrow the government and we can join the rest of the world. Whether or not that ever works, remains to be seen, but I'm just telling you that's the idea behind that. More, it says, the streets of eastern Caracas, an opposition stronghold, remain largely deserted in the days following Maduro's capture under the watch of the armed colectivos. So here's a quote from someone. "We can't celebrate anything," said a woman walking through Cachao neighborhood on Sunday evening, who declined to give her name. "If we celebrate, the colectivos could kill us." And I've heard this stuff before. Also been hearing from, say, if you're in the USA or wherever, and you're trying to contact family in Venezuela, you may not be able to contact them. Internet could be down or otherwise. So that's why you may not see people celebrating and stuff like that, because there's armed dudes on the street, right? The dudes on the street was kind of interesting. They were protecting the palace, and then they were protecting the statue. I thought that was kind of interesting. So, and immediately I went to my mind of like, if you remember when the U.S. invaded Iraq, you had these dudes that toppled over the Saddam statue, that kind of stuff. So I think they're trying to avoid specifically that kind of scenario. And I remember, if I remember this correctly too, the Iraq thing, I think there was a lot of plundering or pillaging, if that's the right word, of like the palaces and stuff like that. And you guys probably remember this stuff. It was a mess. I remember this. So it's interesting that they're specifically guarding like the palace and then the statues. One collectivo named Ricardo told the Financial Times that Maduro's extraction was believed to be the result of a traitor in his ranks, despite the fierce gun battle which preceded his capture, in which dozens of bodyguards were killed. And this is the first I've heard of this. And you never know with these accounts of be it the U.S. side or the Venezuela side of what actually happened at the battle or battles, right? I know there are explosions, stuff like that, but I'll just say you never know for sure on these kind of things. But we have heard that was either 40 to 80 people killed, but you never know. We don't have names. You just don't know. Quote, "We remain active with our rifles and will respond if necessary." Here's more. An indication of how tense the situation remained in Caracas after the U.S. strike. Shots were heard near the presidential palace on Monday. Then they said it was like due to drones flying over the area without permission, and the police shot it down. So I certainly imagine that kind of scenario where everyone's on edge and you're definitely not letting drones fly around because you don't know who's operating what, and they're trying to, keep things locked down. Even if residents had wanted to take to the streets over the weekend to cheer for Maduro's removal, as many of their compatriots did around the world, they said they felt they couldn't. Some briefly banged pots and pans out of their windows on Saturday instead. Many saw no reason to celebrate. Here's a quote. "There is no change at all." This is someone who's a banking advisor, whose sense of disillusionment is shared by some other Venezuelans. "We are going to remain the same, in the same situation because it's the same people," right? Because basically they kidnapped Maduro, but then the vice president and all the same colectivos and stuff are still in power, and they're roaming the streets with guns, as you can see. And so in that scenario, let's just play this out, have a conversation about it. If Trump's like, okay, I'm going to come free the people, then theoretically you would have to come in and then go to war with that party, right? So, I mean, how's that going to play out? Just removing Maduro alone isn't going to suddenly liberate the people. And that's sort of why then Trump's like, okay, we're not really focused on election. Let's just get the vice president. We'll see if we can get the oil that way. So Trump's not really interested in freeing the people at all. It's obvious as they've focused on the oil and the U.S. interests, and Stephen Miller is like threatening people, etc. And from just the regular people's point of view, if the U.S. has sanctions on your country and it's hard to trade and you can't send out your oil tankers to bring money into the economy, it makes it very, very, very difficult. Similar situation with Cuba, right? Others remained optimistic about the possibility of regime change, just not that it would happen soon. Here's another quote from a local person. "I believe that if a transition process does in fact begin, there will not be elections in the short term, at least not this year. To ensure governability, it will be necessary to at least partially restore institutional capacity." And I think people have a problem with electricity right now and just other basic services, right? Confusion was also widespread, not only about what could happen, but also what would happen actually over the weekend. "It's all very strange," as a local person. "Still unsure if Rodriguez had helped Trump. I think she got rid of Maduro." It's a local person, so that's what some people are talking about. And I really don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I think there's a possibility, though, but I don't know. While questions swirled over the country's past and future, many Venezuelans simply did what they have always done, got on with it. Here's a quote. "Governments come and go, but we're still here, and we have to work." It's coming from someone who's selling hot dogs. And they have a picture here. And, when I saw this, it really reminded me of, I used to live in Vietnam. I'm from Vietnam, but I used to live there. And there's a lot of these kind of food carts. It literally looks exactly the same. They probably come from the same place or something. And, when you go and you hang out with locals like this, the best way to describe it is people just want to sell their hot dogs or sell their sandwiches and stuff like that. People in the community, they come and they want to do these kind of things. And, you'll find, and I can see from the streets and stuff like that, is if your country doesn't have basic services, just a lot of things go unkept. That's a best way to describe it. And it can be questionable by neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods will have full internet, full power and everything. Other neighborhoods will completely not. And that's the kind of situation that if we continue on the Trumpy path, you'll kind of get into that, just massive wealth gaps. And you'll find that in developing countries. So it's not that they don't have basic services in the sense in this situation. It's just that, I don't know the percentage. We'll just say a large portion may be really, really struggling, and then a very small portion will be doing just fine. But also the infrastructure itself may not necessarily be great. It's a developing country. Let's put it that way. But I don't wish any harm on the people whatsoever, and wish them the best. That's why we're going through this stuff together. Just can hear what they say. It says, as Maduro tightened his grip on power over the last decade, Venezuelans have endured hyperinflation, food and medical shortages, and collapse in public services. Close to a quarter of the population has fled the country, some 8 million, but those who stayed have learned to adapt and survive. Hundreds of people have taken jobs as caretakers for the homes of absent migrants. Others look after the elderly as young family members move to the U.S. and other South American countries in search of work. Shoppers have relied on messaging apps to track grocery supplies across the city, as crisis in recent years has sparked bouts of panic buying. And I did hear right after the U.S. attack that people were trying to stock up on fuel and food and such like that. So I think you could have a really dangerous situation in terms of just getting food and the stuff that people need. I mean, medical supplies is a real serious thing. If you have a member of the family who's sick or just needs whatever medicine, it's just a bad situation all around. Let's be frank. And as I said, when Trump's all talking about oil and stuff like that, he doesn't care about the regular people at all. Here's more. It says, others focused on more urgent problems. Someone named Amelia Costa, a 70-year-old retiree in the city who has lived through dictatorships and a coup attempt, as well as oil booms and busts, said one of her top concerns at the moment was recharging her phone after Saturday's explosions knocked out her power. Quote, "We've been without electricity and water here. The situation is very distressing." And that's sort of what is going on with the regular people. And again, I wish them the best. But right now they're doing crackdowns, and they say they're supposedly looking for anyone who collaborated with the U.S., which who knows if they're going to find anything or how long the crackdown will last. And then Trump claims or it's him and Miller that they're running the country. And Miller was recently, hey, we got an armada of ships and we decide if they can do commerce or not, right? And so they're going to try to, block them from doing any sort of business. It's just a mess. You can see it, and the regular people are caught in the middle. And I just wanted to give you a chance to hear some of their voices. So that's my thoughts on this. I'd like to hear yours, and I'll catch you on the next video.